Hello, welcome back to the School of Law at the University of Limerick. This is video 5, our final video in our series, and we're looking at exam preparation. So in this video, we're going to look at what are exams like in university. Many of you may be coming directly from secondary school where you had a small class, or from a break in education, and you're wondering in a large institution like the University of Limerick, what will your exams be like? The first thing to say is Student Academic Administration will put together an exam timetable for you. We in the School of Law are not responsible for the timetable, so it's SAA that will do this for you. It's really important, therefore, that you have registered for all of your modules early in the semester so that when it comes to the exams and the weeks before the exams, your timetable has all your modules listed on it for the exam. You can find your timetable for the exams on the Timetable website, and again here you will put in your individual student number and your password. Most exams are 2 hours long, though some may be shorter and some might be a little longer. Exams are spread over 2 weeks in December and again in May, and those will be in weeks 14 and weeks 15. Again, if you need to repeat a module or you were sick and missed a module and now have an I grade, which we will talk about in a few minutes, you will sit your exams for those exams that you missed in December or May in the following August. And exams take place in both classrooms or in large exam halls all around the campus. So it is very important for you to look up your timetable as soon as you are told that the timetable is available so that you can find out where your exam will be taking place and in what building. So you will have questions. What do you need to bring on the day of the exam? So the first thing to remember, and you cannot go into the exam hall without this, is your student ID card. So this is the ID card that you will have received during orientation week. Again, it has your student name, your ID number and your photo on it. And it's really important that you have this ID card with you during all of your exams. You might ask, what will you do if you lose your ID card? You must immediately go to Student Academic Administration where you can get a replacement ID card. But again, please do remember you will need it going into your exam. Also make sure you know where your exam is on. So do recheck your timetable in case the venue or the time might have changed, and also to ensure that you understand where it is that that classroom or exam hall is on campus. Many times you may never have been in that building before or never in that classroom before, and it's important to give yourself time to get there. Also as well, arrive 30 minutes in advance of the exam so that you have time to be there and to get your seat and to be there in advance of the exam paper being given out. So just some helpful tips as well. Please don't bring your phone or your bag with you to the exam venue. You are not allowed to bring any of these personal effects into the exam venue, and therefore if you leave them outside the venue, the university and the School of Law will not be responsible for those effects. So therefore please do ensure that you leave them at home or leave them in your car, for example. Make sure to bring water with you because again, you'll be under pressure and you might be there for up to 2 hours. You don't need to bring paper with you. So unlike maybe in secondary school where you provided your own paper in your exams, here we would provide you with exam booklets, but do bring your own pens. Another question you might have is what happens during the exam? Well, hopefully everything in terms of your preparation will have gone well and you will be sitting there writing away your exam answers. But just to talk a little bit about the structure itself. So once the exam starts, you will be asked to sign the register. So here, one of the invigilators in the exam hall will bring around a register and they will also check your ID. So that's why it's so important that you have your ID card with you, and you'll be asked to leave your ID card on the desk for the duration of the exam. You will also be given an answer booklet. So this is a booklet which you will write all your answers into. Again, make sure to put your ID number on the front of that answer booklet, and also your personal details such as your name, etc. will also be put on the front of the booklet, and then the part where your name is needs to be folded over and sealed. You can also ask for more booklets, so if you have made huge preparations for the exam and you know lots of useful information and you run out of paper in your first booklet, you can always raise your hand and ask for a second booklet. You can also ask for rough work paper, so again, if you want to put your thoughts down on a rough work page, you can also ask for this in the exam, and do make sure to put your ID number on it and insert your rough work paper into your exam booklet. So again, it all goes off as one package at the end of the exam. So another question, and I'm going to briefly address this issue, is what if you were sick at the time of the exam? So this is just some starter information. Obviously all other information is available on the Student Academic website and in the Student Handbook. But just to say that in the case of a medical and/or psychological illness or immediate family bereavement, students need to make an appointment with the relevant service and must submit satisfactory evidence to support the request for an I grade. So what do we mean by the relevant service? An example of that would be the Student Health Centre here on campus, the counselling service here on campus, or the chaplaincy service also here on campus. Again, if you secure an I grade, you will sit your exam during the summer exams at the end of August. Again, more information about illness or bereavement during the exams, as I said, you can get through the SAA website. So these are just a few tips on answering questions. So again, in the exam, whether it's an essay question or a problem question, it seems obvious, but do read all the questions carefully, particularly in a law exam, because it is all the fine details that will help you to answer your questions correctly. Again, plan your answers, so do use rough work paper to decide what would be in your introduction, your main body, and your conclusion. Do refer back to the question regularly. What I mean by this is not to write out the question again repeatedly, but to ensure that you are actually answering the question that was asked and not one that you think was asked. Again, as I said already in a previous video, keep facts of cases short. All you need is a few sentences on the facts of the case, the background of the case. And again, as I said previously, you don't need to learn off year numbers. Very important that you demonstrate outside reading in your exam. However, in the exam, we don't expect you to use Oscola, the referencing system, because it is an exam. So while you will use Oscola in your continuous assessment essays, for example, in the exam it is sufficient for you, within the body of your answer, to cite the name of an author and maybe the name of their textbook or the name of their journal article. You don't need to know publishers or year numbers or the name of the journal itself. Also important in the exam that you write in the third person. So what that means is that you use phrases such as it could be argued, it would appear, it is questionable, it seems, etc. So it's also important to talk a little bit about problem style questions. So in our previous video we talked about essay style questions, and problem questions are quite unique to law, and there are a few other disciplines who also do these types of questions. The problem question is where you're giving a factual scenario and asked to advise your clients. Again, in answering a problem style question, you should adhere to a particular structure, which is the ILAC method, in putting together your answer. So the ILAC method stands for issue, law, application, and conclusion. So issue, what you're doing here is you're reading through your problem question in your exam, and you're working out all of the different issues that crop up. By way of a tip, it can often be very useful to take out a pen or a highlighter and highlight those issues as you're going through the question. Again, it can be useful to reread the question a number of times so that you can work out what are the different issues that are cropping up. Also, for example, it might be something like, is the person an employee or an independent contractor? Is the person an adult or a child, for example? Again, by way of another tip, whenever you see a date or a time, this can be indicative of an issue in the question. The second area you need to look at then is the law, and this is quite a substantial part of your answer, and this is where you talk about the different pieces of legislation, EU law, the Constitution, and case law that may apply to the issues that you have found in your question. Again, it's very important that you work through all these pieces of law that are relevant to the issues, and also as well that you are succinct in how you discuss them. Application is important also. This is our third part, and this is where you apply the law to the issues that you have earlier spotted. So again, when you have gone through all of the law in a very comprehensive way in your law section, you will now in your application section apply that law to those issues. And in your conclusion then, it's how do you advise your client? What would you tell your client if they were sitting in front of you and you were their solicitor or barrister in the future? I have a link here, and this is to a very useful document that the Student Law Society put together, and it is included in that very useful document is an exam preparation guide, and that's been written by one of my colleagues here in the law school, Dr. Norah, and it's a very useful resource for you in terms of what do staff expect in terms of an answer to a problem question, but also an answer to an essay question. So, just to briefly recap, and we already talked about essay questions before, but it's very important as well that you do have a structure when answering an essay question in the exam. Again, in your general introduction, do try to remember to talk about the basic theme of the essay, so what is the legal issue that you're talking about, or the legal concept, how you intend to approach the issues raised, and also a brief preview of the essay structure, so how do you intend to deal with the essay question. In your main body then, you have your key issue, you divide it into paragraphs, and you can use subheadings if you wish, and it's also important as well that your information is logically ordered as you progress through answering the question. Your conclusion then is where you will briefly summarise the points that you have earlier made. Also, you'll indicate the overall response of you, the writer, to the essay title. So therefore, do you agree with the title of the essay? Do you disagree? Or have you decided to come to a kind of a middle road where you partially agree and partially disagree? Very important to remember in the exam is timing. So even though you might have 2 hours in the exam to answer 3 questions, for example, it's very important that you divide up and plan your time. Again, the overall mark is more important than one question. I've often found from correcting exam papers that people tend to spend a lot of time on one question and write pages and pages for that question, and unfortunately, while they do very well in that one question, they never get to question 2 or question 3. And therefore it means that you are losing a lot of marks by not answering the other questions that you're meant to. So do please try to plan your time well and stick to that timing in the exam. It also can be very helpful to work out the timings in advance, so that instead of when you're going into the exam spending time trying to work out how much time you can spend on each question, have that worked out in advance of going into the exam. Final thing to talk about in this short video on exam preparation is classic mistakes. So these are just a few bullet points to highlight some of the mistakes I've noticed that students and fellow faculty have spotted students carrying out in their exams. So, for example, things like not answering the question asked. So this is where we appreciate you probably did a lot of study and a lot of preparation for the exam, and the topic that came up isn't exactly all of the content that you studied, so you slightly change the question that's asked. Please don't do that. Please do stick to the question that is asked so that you can get the maximum amount of marks possible for relevant information. Again, many students don't include an introduction or conclusion. You might think, oh, that's a waste of my time. I should get straight into putting everything I know in my head down on the page. It is important though to have a structure, because it will help you to maximise how you talk about the law and analyse the law and answer the question and respond to the question that you've been asked. Wandering off the topic, students often are very comfortable with particular parts of a topic and therefore will spend more time talking about that part of the topic, and that might not be relevant to your question. So try to ensure that you stick to the topic or the issues that you've been asked to talk about. Your answer is not structured. Again, this is up to yourself whether you want to use headings or subheadings, or how you arrange your answer is important. Again, it's about the content, but again, the content will come across in the best way possible if you have a good structure to your answer. Another issue is that students often run out of time, and we've just talked briefly about timing. Students often don't get to finish a question, or they don't attempt all the questions that they should because of poor time management. So do stick to your pre-prepared timings, the timings that you've worked out before you go into the exam. Stick to those when you're in there. Did more than the number of questions asked. You are of course welcome to attempt more than the required number of questions that you're meant to answer. So for example, if you're asked to answer 3 and you decide to answer 4, that's perfectly fine, and you will be marked on the best 3 of those 4. The only issue might be that if you divide your time up to answer 4 questions, you're diluting that time that you have, and it means that your answers might not be as good as they would have been if you had that extra time where you answered just the number of questions that you were asked to. A few more mistakes then. This is very important. Please write clearly. We often have issues where students don't write legibly, and it means it's very difficult for us to work out what you're saying. You might have studied lots, prepared lots, and you've some great information on the page, but if you don't write clearly, we can't understand what you're saying. You rambled on in the introduction. Your introduction should be short, and again, in your introduction you're highlighting the key issues, or you're talking in an essay question about what you're going to talk about in the latter parts of the essays. Don't ramble in your introduction. A succinct introduction and then on to your main body. This is another issue, is you didn't attempt all the required questions. So again, in each individual module, you will have a different number of questions that you will have to answer in the exam. Please ensure before you go into the exam that you know how many questions you'll be expected to attempt. And again, also those instructions will be written on the front of your exam paper. So do go and check before you start your exam on the front of the paper, how many questions are you meant to be answering. Again, you rephrase the question as the introduction. Don't waste time in your introduction writing out the question again. You don't need to do that. You didn't emphasize key points. So here, this might be where you're wandering off the topic, you're not getting to the point in the essay, or with the problem question, you are not spotting all the issues, or you're not dealing with them all. You didn't answer the specific topic. So here, this is where you gave a general overview to the question that was asked, rather than actually dealing with the question itself. So it's important that even when you're talking about the law in your question, that you constantly refer back to what is the question that was posed to you, and why are you including this piece of law or this case, for example. Lastly then, a few final tips on mistakes that are commonly made. You focus too much on the facts of a case. So this can often happen where students will write a number of paragraphs on the facts of a case because they find those facts very interesting. And that's fine. However, you are wasting time. You would be better off, as I said in an earlier video, writing 2 sentences, 3 sentences on the facts of the case, and then spending the rest of your time on answering the question, but also on analysing the judgment and why the judgment was made as it was. You didn't include any outside reading or cases. This is a major issue in an exam answer. You have to have case law in there, you have to have outside reading, you have to have legislation or the constitutional references, or references to EU laws as the subject might require. You stated the law incorrectly, so this is where, for example, you're talking about a case and its facts and judgments and it's simply wrong, or you talk about a piece of legislation and you have the incorrect interpretation of that legislation and what that legislation is about and what it covers. Lastly, and this is an issue that has cropped up, you've stated English law and not Irish law. So often in modules you will find that we talk about English law and we talk about other countries' laws in a comparative sense. However, if you're advising fictitious clients in a particular module, then you need to advise your client, because they're based in Ireland, about Irish law. Of course, if you're in a comparative law module, then you can advise your client in a comparative sense. But be careful that you are stating the correct law for the module that you are doing the exam for. Thank you for watching video 5 on exam preparation, and thank you for watching all 5 parts of our series here, welcoming you to the School of Law at the University of Limerick. I hope you will enjoy your time studying at the School of Law, and I hope that these resources and information will be helpful to you during your studies. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media. Thank you. Bye.